The following video is not made for kids. Viewer discretion is advised. Hello to my subscribers, this is the TFA coming to you with a double review, and tonight we're going to be taking a look at two Transformers action figures, which I originally was going to pass on entirely, but after watching several reviews with Transformers fans and collectors having mostly positive things to say about these figures, and after some convincing from a good friend of mine, shout out to MO Transformers, he convinced me to add these figures to my Transformers collection. So without further delay, let's take a look at Transformers Studio Series 1986 Core Class Ironhide and Ratchet. So Ironhide and Ratchet are the two latest in a handful of Transformers Generation 1 characters that have been given. I think the height of Core Class Transformers figures is 3.5 inches tall. And so Ratchet and Ironhide together are the fourth and fifth Autobots released in this well, technically, counting the Dinobots, they're technically they're two out of up to what is now 11 core class small-sized Autobots. It's released between both the Studio Series 86 and the Transformers Legacy lines. And so, in addition to Ironhide and Ratchet and the core class Dinobots, which I reviewed in my review of Volcanicus, there's also Optimus Prime, who I have here for some size comparisons in a moment. And then there's also Bumblebee, who was the first one released in the Buzzworthy line. And then there's also Hot Rod, who was released in the Kingdom line. And so, not counting the core class Dinobots, there are 5 Autobots who've been given a core class sized figures. I know there's technically also Wheelie, but the thing with Wheelie is that his core class figure is size accurate next to the larger Transformers action figures, but with Ironhide and Ratchet, these are miniature versions here. I reviewed Voyager class Ratchet a few weeks ago. I found him at my local Target store last month, and so it's pretty nice having both these figures, that I was able to get both these figures at the same time off of Amazon. Ratchet was released technically last year in 2022, and then Ironhide was released this year. So I personally find it kind of funny that the same year we got Voyager class Ironhide, we got Core class Ratchet, and then vice versa. Hasbro and we switched it. We got Core class Ironhide alongside Voyager class Ratchet. So that was pretty fun to see. The artwork used on the tops of their boxes, it is, I believe, the same exact artwork that's used on both of the Voyager class figures. So since Core Class Ratchet was released first, his artwork was transferred to the artwork used on Studio Series Voyager Class Ratchet, I believe. I think the angle of Ratchet's gun might be slightly different because the Voyager Class Ratchet figures box is right there on the back. But if I try and angle it at the same angle, as you can see right there, I believe, yeah, it is the exact same image. So that's a pretty fun thing to look at there. It's the same thing with Ironhide. The artwork that was used on Studio Series 86 Ironhide, I believe it's the exact same one. There's Voyager class Ironhide's box right up here on the top of my screen, and if I get it at the correct angles, you can see, yeah, so the exact same box art that's used on the Voyager class figures of Ironhide and Ratchet, Ratchet is used here on the Core class figures. So I guess Hasbro and Tomy decided that since Ratchet and Ironhide appear for a brief moment at the start of the Transformers 1986 X film. Regardless of what size class of action figures they get, they're going to be given the same artwork here. So if we ever were to get deluxe class figures of Ironhide and Ratchet in the Studio Series 86 line, they most likely have the same exact artwork that's used here as well. So that's just something that I find amusing. Using that the exact same box art used on the core class figures is the same box art from the Voyager class figures. One thing to note about Ironhide is that this particular copy, when it was at Amazon's facility, something happened that squished Ironhide's box, but the figure itself is still fully intact. But because the box was pretty badly damaged, Amazon sold this at a discount price, so I was able to get Ironhide for $2.50 cheaper than he normally goes. So I figured as long as the figure itself is alright, then getting it inside a damaged box at a discount ice of $2.50 off is a pretty good enough deal. So That's why Ironhide also has this sticker, because Amazon puts these barcode stickers on boxes for products that the box is damaged, but the product itself is intact and is still good for sale. Also, come around here to the back of the box, you've got product photos of Ironhide and Ratchet, and they both transform back and forth between their robot modes and their alt modes in just 15 steps. There's no one-sentence bios on the core class figures for the Studio Series 86 line, but from the reviews I've already seen, it's the same for the Voyager class figures of Ironhide and Ratchet as well. They only have two sculpted parts to distinguish them from each other, apart from their paint jobs. They have different sculpted heads. You can see Ratchet has the black V-shaped crest on him, while Ironhide has the mohawk-shaped helmet on his head. And the other part that's sculpted differently on Ironhide and Ratchet, and it's kind of difficult to see while they're inside their boxes, but they each have different sculpted pelvises. So right here on Ratchet's pelvis, which is painted red, it's a different shape than the gray pelvis used here on Ironhide. Ironhide has kind of like a diamond shape on his pelvis, while Ratchet has a more rectangular one on the center of his pelvis. But yeah, it's a I find it interesting that Hasbro and Tomy decided that giving them different sculpted heads wasn't enough. Ratchet and Ironhide each have to have a unique pelvis design, and you can kind of see the difference in their pelvises with the box art. You can see the diamond shape on Ironhide and the more rectangular shape on Ratchet, although the Studio Series logo is kind of obstructing it from view. But yeah, that's pretty much all there is to say about Ironhide and Ratchet. They are just miniature 3-inch versions of the Studio Series Voyager class figures that I've already reviewed. So let's get them out of their boxes and take a close look at both of them in their robot modes. Alright, and one thing I wanted to share before we actually get them out of their packaging is that when Ratchet was released last year in 2022, it was right before Hasbro started to announce that they were going to do plastic-free packaging on Transformers figures. So because Ironhide was released in the middle of the year 2023, when that was happening, plastic-free packaging Hasbro and Tomy went back to doing what they did, starting with the Transformers Hunt for the Decepticons line in 2010, and it lasted until Combiner Wars ended at the beginning of 2016, where they used paper tie-downs to keep Transformers action figures in the boxes. But then, starting with the Titans Return line in 2016, the paper tie-downs were done away with, and Hasbro and Tomy used these plastic tie downs here, which are much cheaper than the paper tie downs to use. And I have never liked plastic tie downs. I loved the paper tie downs that were introduced with the Hunt for the Decepticons line in 2015. And when Titans Return came around and the paper tie downs were replaced with these plastic ones, I hated it, and I still hate it to this day. So seeing the paper tie downs come back for plastic-free packaging was a breath of fresh air for me. And now that Hasbro has announced that they aren't going to continue to do plastic-free packaging, there is going to be some plastic used on the packaging of Transformers action figures. From the photos I've seen of the upcoming Transformers Legacy United / Legacy Year 3 figures that are being released, it doesn't mean that Hasbro and Tomy are going to bring back plastic windows. It means they're going to go back, instead of using paper tie downs, they're going to go back to using these stupid plastic tie downs to hold Transformers action figures inside the boxes. So I think that's a bit of a shame that that's the plastic that's going to be used in packaging, or the plastic tie downs, because they have always been a pain and a hassle when it comes to actually getting Transformers figures out of boxes. And I've enjoyed the return of the paper tie downs. So if I had to choose plastic packaging, I would keep using paper tie downs and bring back plastic windows on the boxes. But I just wanted to share that with you guys. I've debated for a while about doing a discussion video about plastic tie downs versus paper tie downs, but I've never really had the motivation. I'm not really certain if a lot of people will be interested in a discussion video about something like that, but I just wanted to share it here with Core Class Ironhide and Ratchet, since they both use the different tie downs when they're strapped inside their inner packaging, and it is the same image of them on the Autobot space shuttle right before the Decepticons attack them, so you could, if you wanted to, link them together, although it's supposed to be the exact same area of the bridge edge. But yeah, it's interesting seeing them here. They're using the exact same artwork. Alright, and so before we actually look at Ironhide and Ratchet themselves, with regards to what I said about paper tie-downs being easier than plastic ones to open up, I timed myself. It took me 20 seconds to release Ironhide from his box with the paper tie-downs, and it took me a whole minute to release Ratchet from his packaging with the plastic tie-downs. So it's about 40-second difference between the two tie-downs. Different the two types, but regardless of which, let's get focused back here and take a look at the figures themselves. So here are Core Class Ironhide and Ratchet, and yeah, I've said this already. For the main gimmick that these figures have going for them, the main motivation for collectors to buy them is that they're 3-inch tall, all figures of Ironhide and Ratchet designed to interact with Core Class Optimus Prime, Bumblebee, Hot Rod, and the Dinobots. So for a size comparison, here they are next to Core Class Optimus Prime, who was originally released in the Kingdom line, and they're about a head shorter than Optimus Prime is, which is in scale with their cartoon animation models. So Ironhide and Ratchet are among the smaller sized Core Class Transformers figures, since most of the Core Class Transformers that have been released so far have been the same height that Optimus Prime is. But at least Ironhide and Ratchet, they aren't as short as Bumblebee or Wheelie. Maybe they are, I honestly don't know with certainty since I haven't looked at too many reviews of them. But yeah, here they are transformed into their robot modes, and like I said, the only difference between in them sculpt-wise are their different heads. They've got the cartoon heads given to them by Sumbo Productions, and then I thought this was the only difference between the two of them at first, but just like the Voyager class Studio Series 86 figures, they have different pelvises as well. So here's the more rectangular shaped pelvis on Ratchet, and here's the diamond shaped pelvis on Ironhide. One thing I find amusing is that Ironhide and Ratchet, their pelvises uh, are cast in a shade of plastic, but then the front of them are none of them have different paint, and it's almost reversed. Ratchet's pelvis is actually made of white plastic, and then the front is painted red, and Ironhide's pelvis is actually red plastic and the front painted gray. So, um, kind of sort of Ironhide and Ratchet, you could say, have somewhat inverted colors from each other, but it's not a perfect match since Ironhide's colors are his secondary color scheme is gray instead of white, and the only red parts Ratchet has are his hands and the Autobot logos on his shoulders, just like the Voyager class figure that came out this year. Core class Ratchet, his Autobot logo owes instead of being the red crosses that he had in the G1 cartoon back in that that he was given by Sumbo Productions, because the Red Cross Association doesn't like people to use the Red Cross logo for anything that isn't related to medicine or medical practices. Hasbro and Tomy came up with a whole new Autobot logo of Ratchet that's actually based on the Blue Cross Association nation, but it's painted red, and has an Autobot logo in the center of it. So one could argue that this is the Autobots Red Cross seen on planet Cybertron. I personally think it's a much more elaborate design, and I really enjoyed on Ratchet more than the actual red crosses that he had. It's one of those situations where, because of trademark issues, it's a paint job that Ratchet probably most likely will never have. But at least it's better than not being able to have the same vehicle mode, like Generation 1 Megatron, or even having to have a permanently new copyrighted name named the way Dinobot Slag now has to be called Dinobot Slug. So I'm personally happy with the new logos that Ratchet has here on his shoulders. That said, it is a bummer that Ratchet doesn't have the same Autobot logo on his chest that Ironhide has. So when you transform them into their vehicle modes, because Ratchet's the robot mode shoulders become hidden in alt mode, Ratchet's Autobot logos disappear. So Ratchet is actually a factionless transformer when he's in his alt mode, but Iron's Autobot logo at least is visible in both modes. My only main gripe with Ironhide's Autobot logo is that it's a standard red Autobot logo on a silver background, but because Ironhide himself is red, it looks like he just has a silver outline Autobot logo, and I kind of wish they would have made given the logo a white background, instead of just making it a silver outlined Autobot logo. But these are just minor gripes. Articulation for these figures is pretty standard. You have swivel joints in the heads, universal joints in the shoulders. So the arms have the potential to spin 360 degrees. They can go out this far. No swivel joint in the bicep, but you do get a swivel joint inside the shoulder itself. Hinged elbows, no wrist articulation since the hands are sculpted at the end of the arm. You do get a waist articulation, but it's the back of the waist. Ace has the front bumper for the alt mode on it, so the waist joint is actually rendered somewhat useless, bringing out Ratchet for the leg articulation. You got ball jointed hips, so the legs can go out to the side that far, they can go forward this far, they can go back this far. Or no actual thigh swivel, but the ball joints in the knees allow you to swivel the legs at the knees, and then they can hinge out that far. And no ankle articulation due to the feet sculpted on the rope mode feet being sculpted on here are flat stubs, which is semi cartoon accurate, but considering the small size that has the designers at Hasbro and Takatomi went when coming out with Core Class Ironhide and Ratchet, it is nice to see that there. Now, I keep saying that the heads and the pelvises are the only sculpted parts between the two of them, and I apologize, I forgot that there is a third piece of them that's sculpted differently. Flipping them around to the back, the third part of them that's sculpted differently are the roofs of the vehicle modes, which just end up forming their backpacks. Ratchet has a light bar on the roof of his vehicle mode since he transforms into a ambulance, and Ironhide has no light bar on him at all since he transforms into a non-modified minivan. And so there are three sculpted parts between them, but if you were to take those sculpted parts off Ironhide and Ratchet are the same figure, just done in different colors. But I just overall am thrilled with how amazed they are, and they really do look like miniature versions of the. As I accidentally drop Ironhide, they do look like miniature versions of the Studio Series Voyager class figures of them that were released as well. I apologize for not bringing those figures out for a size comparison, but it's late at night and I wanted to get through the review as fast as I could, and it's already gone on much longer than I wanted. So, yeah, that's pretty much all there's to say about Ironhide and Ratchet. The core class figures are pretty nice looking 3-inch versions of them. So, without further delay, let's get them transformed into their alt modes and wrap up the review. Alright, so here are core class Ironhide and Ratchet transformed into their alt modes. Pretty nice vans. Again, the only main difference, apart from the paint job, is that Ratchet has a light bar siren on his roof since he is an ambulance, and Ironhide does not since he's a standard van. Uh, but yeah, for what they're trying to be is being 3-inch tall versions of Ironhide and Ratchet. I think they are pretty decent looking Transformers action figures. On my copy of Ironhide, I think it's because his box got crushed when he was still at Amazon.com. But the kneecaps of him, which become the back roof section of the van mode, there's a horrible stress mark right here on this one, and so I now have to decide if I should send this back to Amazon and get a replacement copy or not, or if it's worth even bothering to go through the hassle. But Ratchet, as far as I can tell, since he was brand new, he's not damaged at all, so that's a pretty nice looking there. Um, and yeah, the wheels are just clipped on, so Ratchet has white hubcaps inside his tires, and Ironhide has red ones. The only parts of the windows that are painted are the front windshield and the driver's and passenger side windows. The other windows sculpted throughout the rest of the vehicle modes are unpainted plastic, which I think is kind of a waste since the windows that are painted are in fact painted. So why in the world Hasbro and Cartoni didn't find the budget to do all the other windows, I honestly cannot say. The laser guns are sculpted in the exact same colors that Ironhide and Ratchet are done in. Ratchet's laser guns are cast in white plastic painted silver, and Ironhide's are red plastic painted silver. If you wanted to give Ratchet and Ironhide some breakup of their monotonous white and red paint jobs, you could swap laser guns between the two of them. But overall, they are pretty fantastic looking action figures. There's Ironhide's Autobot logo. Again, the robot mode shoulders get covered, so Ratchet has no logos on him as well. Oh, now, one thing to note about Ironhide and Ratchet is that Transformers fans and collectors have been finding it much more difficult to get all the panel sections on Ironhide lined up properly more than they do with Ratchet. And on my copy of Ironhide, I found two problems. The ball joints in his robot mode legs. There was some unshaven plastic residue from when it was molded at the factory left on there, so I had to kind of sand it and the ball joint down to get it to rotate properly. But one of the main problems is that opening up the side panel, here, the robot mode pelvis, it has to rotate upward and sit parallel with the roof of the vehicle mode in order for the get all the different panel sections to line up properly. And on Ironhide, because of his newly sculpted pelvis, it's refusing to completely line up properly, and the result of that is Ironhide's different panel sections don't really want to come together and stay in place just as securely as Ratchet's does. So whether or not that's a universal problem with Ironhide and Ironhide having a more difficulty with his panel sections lining up than Ratchet, I cannot say, but I've seen more reviews of Ironhide having his panel sections not line up as securely as Ratchet does. But overall, I do think they are pretty great Transformers action figures. And for a size comparison, once again, here they are with Core Class Optimus Prime. So, yeah, it's in vehicle mode, the scale isn't as great as it is in robot mode. Oh, but again, they are. I think they successfully achieved being Core Class sized versions of Ironhide and Ratchet that can now stand beside Optimus Prime. So if you have these figures along with Kingdom/Legacy Core Class Hot Rod and the buzzworthy Core Class Bumblebee figure, then Optimus Prime can have 5 Autobots standing beside him, and as he goes to fight off the Core Class S-sized Decepticons. And, but yeah, for what they are trying to be, yeah, I'm sorry for repeating myself again, but yeah, they are pretty nice, tiny-sized action figures of Ironhide and Ratchet, and I think they now hold the title of being the smallest Generation 1 inspired Ironhide and Ratchet figures that have ever been released by Hasbro and Takara Tomy. So, for the proverbial question of the review, do I recommend getting Core Class Ironhide and Ratchet and adding them to your Transformers collections? Well, here's my thing, honestly. I personally don't think that Core Class Ironhide and Ratchet are must-have Transformers action figures. Ratchet came out last year, so I technically waited over a year to get Core Class Ratchet, but if you're a fan of Ironhide and Ratchet and you're a fan of Core Class size Transformers action figures, then by all means get these figures and add them to your Transformers collections. But if you aren't really into the idea of having tiny sized versions of Ironhide and Ratchet and you'd rather save up your money for the Voyager class versions of them, then these figures are a pass. As they aren't as sought after as other Core Class Transformers figures are, such as Studio Series 86 Frenzy, who came out out of out recently. But they aren't the most terrible Core Class Transformers figures that have ever come out. But in my opinion, as far as how much of a necessity Core Class Ironhide and Ratchet are, I'd say they're right in the middle, where either you completely love them and need to have them in your collections, or you aren't really too much of a fan of these Core Class size versions of them, and they're an easy pass. So, as far as must-have Transformers action figures go, I'd say Ironhide and Ratchet are right down the middle. You either want them or you don't. Owned so. They aren't terrible Transformers action figures, but they aren't necessarily ones that would be at the top of most collectors' lists of figures to add to their collections. So thank you guys all so much. This has been the TFangy. This has been my double review of Transformers Studio Series 86 Core Class Ironhide and Ratchet. If you're fans of Ironhide and Ratchet, then by all means get these figures, but if you aren't really into these Core Class sized versions of Ironhide and Ratchet, then they can be easy passes. So thank you guys all so much, and until next time, you guys, stay safe, stay healthy, transform and roll out. Goodbye.